All right, winners have parties, losers, unfortunately, we have Zoom meetings. Queensland, they've won their first Origin series since 2017. Brendan Bradford, you're a Queensland apologist. How are you feeling this morning?
First of all, great. Yeah, it was a great game 3. Like, it finally felt like Origin last night. First 2 games we sort of had our reservations on what was not quite clicking, why it didn't feel like Origin. Up there, maybe it was the crowd, maybe it was 50-odd thousand people up at Suncorp Stadium, but it finally had that big game atmosphere. There's a lot on the line, and yeah, good result for Queensland if you're a Queensland fan.
It was. I find this a little bit hard to say, but I loved that Origin series. I thought last night was so good. It wasn't like a classically amazing game, but it had everything you wanted out of Origin. Heaps of spice, like you saw. Some Storm on Storm drama, Rabbitoh on Rabbitoh. What was the other one? Even Panthers players going at each other. It had it all. It's fantastic. Lockie, I might start with you, mate. When was the last time you saw such a dominant performance from one player like Cameron Munster had throughout this series in 2 games?
It's really hard to think, but you've got to look at some of the greats of Origin. Like in recent history, you Jonathan Thurston when he's busted his shoulder and he still had an amazing game. You Jared Haynes in terms of dominance for New South Wales. Players like that. It was just an incredible performance from Munster. He looked dangerous every time he had the ball. And I think there was an incredible stat in terms of just the first half alone, the distance he covered. He was absolutely everywhere on the field. Like if a Queensland forward was about to give an offload, it was Munster who was there. If there was a break on, Munster was there. And it was almost a very Lockyer-esque performance in terms of that really good interconnection of a 5'8" and a fullback at the same time. I think Munster drew on a lot of his fullback experience to just sort of, he knows where to be at the right time. His effort to set up that eventual try to Edric Lee and that kick and chase, how he regathered that and managed to kick the ball before he got tackled was remarkable. And yeah, it's just one of the all-time great Origin performances to lead Queensland to one of the most unlikeliest of Origin victories.
Brendan, where are you getting your Cameron Munster tattoo?
I'm going to get it right under the arm, like where you get your Premier, your Premiers 2020, right under there. I might get him day 3 of his bender. I think that's going to be good.
To me, as a New South Wales fan, and we just kind of touched on it, but it kind of felt like peak golden era for New South Wales fans, where you knew if the Blues made one mistake, they'd be punished with like Queensland scoring a try. That's just how good Munster was with ball in hand. It felt like he couldn't be stopped.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. And the periods in that first half, especially where you just thought, mate, Queensland should be up by about 3 tries here. They could have scored a lot more. They were still a little bit disjointed in attack, but it sort of added to the whole atmosphere and the whole vibe of a deciding Origin. Like, it wasn't, you go back, 10 years and 15 years and you think Origin is such like a tense atmosphere. It's often very low scoring. There's usually, one mistake or whatever that'll decide it, or one miraculous piece of play. But last night was a bit more open, and it felt just a little bit like anything could happen at any time. And it was just a lot more. It was a lot very exciting. It was very good.
I loved it. So thanks to Repco, it starts with the parts. I'm going to make a bold-ish prediction here. There is no one happier in the world right now than Craig Bellamy. So you've lost the big 3 in the past few years, right? Now you've got Harry Grant, ridiculous last night. You got Munster at 5'8" for the Storm, and then you also got Ryan Pappenhausen at the back. Like, they only just lost all those players, and now they've already got another big 3 just kind of waiting there. You must be laughing.
It's going to be incredible just to see Melbourne Storm's dominance continue again over the next decade or so with those players, because I think they all showed they're all representative level players. They're all the best of the best. And Harry Grant's debut last night, as soon as he came off the bench, it was one of the most remarkable Origin debuts I think we've seen, just in terms of impact, immediate impact, because he just offered something that Jake Friend didn't. And I think it was something that we knew that he had that Jake Friend didn't going into the series, but Queensland obviously opted for Friend. But just around the ruck, Grant posed so many questions to the New South Wales forwards, and it sort of goes, he's going to be playing the next Origin for 10 years now. It was absolutely ridiculous. And that try that he scored as well, sheer determination, and I think summed up what West Tigers fans had seen from him throughout the year, and got to feel sorry for them. Cam Munster sort of rubbed it in, saying he's not going back to the West Tigers. So, yeah, would have been bittersweet for West Tigers fans watching that performance last night.
Been a tough old week for West Tigers fans, hasn't it? Boys, DCE has never been a massive favourite of Queensland fans for myriad reasons. He was awesome in game one. I didn't think he was man of the match, but he did win it. Last night, incredibly solid. I thought his defence was fantastic. Is this the series which kind of makes Queenslanders love their Maroons captain?
I think this is the redemption arc of DCE north of the border. After the Titans backflip about 5 years ago, he's back, and he played very, very well. But his leadership as well, just his calm presence on the field, even in like post-match press conferences, he's just really well spoken. He knows how to sort of escalate like situations that could explode. Even the locker room talk he gave to Big Tino last week, that shows like he's very comfortable in that leadership position. He's very, very good at it too. Now we've discovered. It could be. This could be the one where he wins them back over.
Hard out. I loved that vision of the locker room of him getting in Tino's face, just with the finger in the chest. Yeah. That's a bold move to do that. Tino's not a small man.
He'd been throwing them about half an hour before. So.
All right. We can't avoid it any longer. Lachlan, I'll start with you. What went wrong with the Blues?
I don't know if it was complacency. I don't know if it was just, I don't think you can say it was a lack of effort or a lack of energy, because I think that was certainly there in parts from the Blues. But I just think that there was something missing. There was almost an expectation that they would eventually get this series done. And that happened before game one, even, when we had people saying worst Queensland side of 40 years. And that was always going to light a fire underneath the Maroons. And as a result, New South Wales needed to bring their game. And in games 1 and 3, they just didn't do that. I think they were lucky to get their first try through James TEDESCO when Corey Allen just dropped a simple bomb. Really, when you look at the game, it could have easily been 12-0 at halftime and almost gone there. I think also Val Holmes bombed about 3 dead set certainties at some point during that game. So really, it could have been about 30-0 to the Maroons at one point before Tupou crosses over on that left-hand side. I don't think you can blame the halves too much. I think, obviously, they might have gone missing a little bit throughout the match, but they did what they had to do. I thought Cleary's kicking game, again, was very good. Obviously, he got that early 40-20 in the first half, and he found a lot of space and did what he had to do. I just think, again, you look at someone like Jack Wyden, he just saw none of the ball in attack, and he's the Dalian medalist. Sure, he's out of position at centre, but you just need to make sure those star attacking players get the ball more than they actually did. And for me, I think the big mistake was going in with 4 forwards. I just think, sure, it worked in game 2, but New South Wales was so dominant in game 2 and Queensland was so poor that I think you could have carried anyone on that bench and New South Wales would have won that game. Last night, they needed that utility player, obviously with Teddy going down, but they just needed that injection of surprise. They needed that injection of pace. And I think it was calling out for Ryan Pappenhausen to be there in a number 14 jersey to just inject a bit of spark into the game, because New South Wales was sorely lacking it last night.
Yeah, they're all pretty fair points. What about you, BB?
Bench. TEDESCO goes down, game over. You bring on Isaiah Yeo at centre. He did his damn best, but he can't keep up with the pace of a Dane Gay guy on that edge. And you're mixing the side around. You've got they had no one to come on, like in game 2 when they dominated through the middle. They had no one making those big meters last night. And like Queensland did in game 1, where those big forwards just took control in the second half. There was no one there from the Blues who could do the job. They needed another big bopper making those meters, and they needed, like you say, Ryan Pappenhausen on the bench, so you don't have to mess up your whole backline and your whole interchange bench when TEDESCO goes down.
Yeah, they're all fair points. I thought it was very interesting that Nathan Brown only played 12 minutes. He only had 3 runs for like 27 meters or so. It was just a bit strange. I understand why they went with 4 forwards. Like, it was a risk they thought they could probably get away with, but gee whiz, didn't that blow up? But also, special shout out to Isaiah Yeo, who looked exactly like I do when I play Oztag, just kind of standing there flat-footed as people run straight around. Like, an incredible player in the middle, had such a good season, but he's not a center, and there's nothing he can do about that.
It's like he wasn't making wrong decisions or anything. Like, he just physically is not up to that center position. He put in a bloody good kick for Addo-Carr to chase. When he got taken out. Like, so, he wasn't bad. It's just not a center. Not his fault.
Special shout out, of course, to Paul Gallen, who just cannot stop taking L's against the Maroons. Man, as soon as he was like, that's the worst team ever, you're like, oh, no, not again.
Don't do it, Paul. And I think a special shout out, I think you mentioned this during the game last night, Danksy. I reckon one of the best sort of professional fouls we've ever seen from Corey Allen, because I think they're going to build the statue outside Suncorp for him now, because if he doesn't do that.
Yeah. Then Addo-Carr scores. I thought it was actually really interesting. Brad Fittler in the post-match said 100% Addo-Carr scores that every day of the week, but it wasn't a penalty try. I'm super happy with it being a sin bin. There was a little bit of conjecture if Addo-Carr would have beaten out Munster. I don't know if he would have or not. I mean, Munster did beat out Cook last week. So I'm fine with that.
Addo-Carr is the fastest man in the world. Addo-Carr is the fastest man on the planet. Addo-Carr is the fastest man on the planet. Shut up.
I actually have a conspiracy theory about the Telstra tracker, that it goes quicker every single year. So, like, say for about 5 years, Addo-Carr is going to be running 45 k's an hour.
So that would make him the fastest man in the world.
Yeah,
good.
At 8.500 meters.
Then it would. Another thing which came up in the post-match, which a few people are blowing up about still, the incident with Jairo, James TEDESCO, went down in the 22nd minute, courtesy of Josh Papali's knee. BB, was there actually anything in it?
Look, I'm coming out in defence of Jairo here, because look, it's not a good look. Fine. Obviously, he didn't know James TEDESCO was knocked out, was concussed. Not even that that's not his go. Like, no one would do that if they knew James TEDESCO was knocked out. And you just got to go back to last week when we saw the punch on. Man, everyone loved it. Everyone's jumping on social media going, oh, how good was it to see a couple of big boys throwing hands. Guarantee you that a lot of those same people that were tweeting how good last week was were jumping on Jai Arrow last week saying it was a bad look. Like, you can't have it both ways, especially when Payne Haas and Tino didn't cop suspensions. Like, we want this aggression, we want this big game intensity. Every now and then, sadly, it's going to go wrong. It went wrong last night, but I don't think there wasn't any malice. It wasn't like ugly, like people are jumping all over Jai Arrow saying that last night.
I think full credit to Arrow as well. As soon as he realised TEDESCO was concussed and he was out, he was the first to call for the medical staff. He was the first to say play should be stopped. I think, yes, it's a bad look. There's going to be photos that go around that don't make Arrow look good. I think it might add a bit of spice to the South Roosters rivalry next year, now that Arrow's heading down to the Borough and taking on TEDESCO at the Roosters. I think that'll be interesting to watch next year. But at the end of the day, I think it was a complete I don't want to say accident, but complete unintentional look from Arrow. And it's definitely no Justin Paul and Steve Price, that's for sure.
A classic for a reason. I think you're right, though. I think that there will be some incriminating kind of stills going around of him looking down at TEDESCO. But as Joey Johns loves to say, the game's not played in slow motion. Like, I didn't see anything in it. It wasn't even looking at him when he tackled him. Yeah,
and there's like videos going around last night where the video stopped right before he looked up at the ref and said, "Oh, mate, this guy's not good." Like, so. People are seeing that and just jumping all over him. And look, I've never met him, but by all accounts, like, really nice guy as well. So look, it's something that went wrong last night, but it's also something, we've all been clamoring for, bring back the biff, all that kind of stuff. So it's going to go wrong from time to time. It's sad.
That's fair. Thanks, Repco. It starts with the parts. Footy season, it's done. We didn't think this would ever happen, but footy is finally over for the year, even though it's Christmas now. Boys, we'll wrap this up. I just got one final question for you. There's been a little bit of early talk that Brad Fittler might be under a little bit of pressure for 2021, losing the unlosable series. I don't think there's any way anybody else takes the job. What do you reckon? What about you, BB?
No, I think he's safe. He should come under some kind of grilling for some of the decisions he made, especially in Game 3 last night, 4 forwards on the bench. But that's pressure that comes with the job, rather than pressure that's going to see him lose his job. 2 series in a row, pretty immaculate record to fall back on. And I just don't think that there's no one obvious clamouring to take his job anyway.
What about you, Locke? Are you getting your pitchfork and your torch?
Not yet. But part of me would love to see, especially if Wayne Bennett sticks around in the Maroons, give Craig Bellamy another crack at the New South Wales job. Let's have a Bellamy-Bennett origin off just to really decide who is the best coach of the modern era. But no, I think Freddie Fittler, despite, as BB mentioned, some interesting decisions there in terms of picking the bench and that sort of thing. I mean, look, my hope is that we have 2 actual centres who put their hand up for selection next year. Obviously, Stephen Crichton, I think, will maybe get to go after another year round. But look, I don't think Freddie did too much wrong. New South Wales, they were there in both Game 1 and 3, and in Game 2, they were the ones who blew Queensland off the park. So, look, I think he'll be there again next year. He'll get another run. He's a New South Wales legend. They're not going to be getting rid of him anytime soon.
Yep, all fair points. I like that. All right, that about does it for us for this year, season 2020 in the books. Thanks for joining us, both you guys. Thanks for giving us your time, and we'll catch you next time.